everybody. Welcome back to Geek-Stew, and this week's episode of Horror Stew. That's right. So when this episode comes out, it's going to be Friday the 13th of November, 2020. Now, I know that, Halloween's already passed, but if you can't tell, it's Friday the 13th, baby. We're going to talk about Friday the 13th. Now, I'm not going to do what I've done previously, like for instance on Halloween, I did a Halloween special. Maybe in the future, I'll do a Friday the 13th special where I go through and talk about all the Friday the 13th movies. But today, I actually wanted to talk about a specific movie. And there's a little bit of a backstory here. I saw this movie when I was younger, and when I watched this movie when I was younger, it was one of the first entries to the Friday the 13th series that I had ever seen, right? I'm one of those people that, like, when I was younger, I would watch movies, I would catch them on TV. I really didn't have any of the streaming services until I was like an adult. So I would watch these movies and stuff when I saw them on TV, when they came up on Sci-Fi or AMC or whatever other television station. And I happened to catch this movie one time. I don't even remember when it was, but I do remember watching it because I was like, what the hell did I just watch? And then obviously I've gone back and watched it over the years, and it makes more sense when you watch previous entries to the film. That being said, today we're going to talk about a movie that is so bad that it's good. A movie that is so goofy that you're like, how does this even relate to previous films? We're going to talk about Friday the 13th, Part 8. That's right, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. So Jason Takes Manhattan. So for folks who don't know, and I have my mystical research device on my iPad here. So for people who don't know, this is Part 8. Now, as an overall, Friday the 13th series is really great. Definitely it's one of those series that definitely took off basically the success of other slasher films in the genre, like Halloween and things like that, and they made it into its own series. They really did. Friday the 13th Part 1, 2, and 3, I would even say that there are some later entries that I even would say that I enjoy. Even some of the worst entries of the series, I can even say that I enjoy. I'm one of those people that I can enjoy pretty much any movie in a film series and say it's great. And when I was talking about doing this, I was actually talking to my wife, and I was like, I want to do an episode about Friday the 13th because it's going to be Friday the 13th. I mean, it's today's Friday the 13th, right? Well, not today, but when you guys watch this, it's Friday the 13th. And I said to myself, I really want to do an episode about Friday the 13th. And I was like, which one can I do it about? Because I just don't want to talk about Friday the 13th. I mean, that doesn't sound interesting to me. And I was like, which one should I talk about? Like, some of them are pretty awful, but I really like them. And there were some honorable mentions, like Jason Goes to Hell. That was supposed to be a prequel to Freddy vs. Jason. If you've never seen the film, Jason Goes to Hell ends with the iconic scene of, Freddy's hand coming up and pulling down the Jason mask. And, of course, you have other films like Jason X, where Jason goes into the future and he looks like a fucking cyborg or whatever, and there are some really good, really bad, I should say, but really good, bad horror films with Friday the 13th. And I also think that there are some in the series that are better than others. I have my favorites. But I was really trying to find one that I really resonated with that was kind of silly, but I was like, I can still vibe with this. And I decided on Jason Takes Manhattan for a couple of reasons. So there's actually 3 reasons why I decided that this was the film that I wanted to talk about today. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to have that conversation. So let's jump into number 1. Number 1, Kane Hodder. All right, I don't care who you are. I don't care who plays who, when, where, why, how. But Kane Hodder. So Kane Hodder, if you don't know who I'm talking about, is the guy under the mask. He plays Jason Voorhees in some of the latter entries of the Friday the 13th film. And honestly, this is probably one of my favorite entries with Kane Hodder, because Kane Hodder is a very large, hulking man. And I definitely feel like he kind of fills out the overalls, if you know what I'm saying. But Kane Hodder is probably my favorite, Jason, and honestly, Jason in this series is it's quite interesting. It's quite the show, if you will. So that would be number one, and that's really kind of a small number one. I don't want to spend too much time on it outside the fact that I really enjoyed Kane Hodder, and he's in some of my other favorite Friday the 13th films. But I don't know, I just felt like he meshed really well with the character in this one, which made me love this movie even more, especially on additional rewatches in the future. You know, more recently I've watched the films, and I'm like, damn, Kane Hodder's killing it, you know. So that would be my number one, and not to say that's the most important, but definitely it adds to the enjoyment when I can enjoy who's behind the mask. And you know, in Kane Hodder too, little sidebar here, Kane Hodder is honestly such a good sport. He does all kinds. He's done all kinds of other movies. He was in. He played Meshuggah in Chillerama, which was an interesting movie to say itself. You know, Kane Hodder even had a cameo and The Rise of Leslie Gordon. Film that I've talked about previously. You can go check both of those episodes out from prior episodes. But enough about Kane Hodder. Kane Hodder's great, love him. But here's going on to number two. Number two, Jason Takes Manhattan happens in Manhattan. Now, I will say that it wasn't actually filmed in Manhattan. If I'm not mistaken, it was filmed in Canada. But regardless of where it's placed, it's supposed to take place in, it's supposed to take place in New York City. And this is one of those, or I shouldn't say episodes, but one of the entries of the series that happens on such a large scale. Like, we've never seen such a large scale Friday the 13th before. I mean, if you go back to the previous films, you see, obviously, I mean, I guess it depends on how you look at it, but everything's always happening in like some backwater city, Camp Crystal Lake. It's in the middle of nowhere. All of those entries are always happening basically where there's nobody. So we're getting to see Jason act more methodically inside of a city setting because, I mean, he can't just kill everybody. I mean, I'm sure he could if he wanted to. He's supposed to be like some supernatural being of evil. But anyways, it happens on such a large scale that you see sort of a different perspective on the Jason character. In addition to that, you see a lot of really interesting things happen. I mean, the infamous boxing on the roof scene. One of the characters literally just starts kickboxing him on top of a roof and then gets his head knocked off, literally. What's the scene where he's walking by the punks and they're like, making fun of him or whatever, or he breaks their boombox and he lifts up his mask and they all get scared, right? That's an infamous scene. Or, just also his face in this film is absolutely disgusting. I mean, like, that's another big thing in this film too, is that, you don't always get a good look of Jason, but in this film you do. You get actually a pretty good look at his face, and it is horrifying. Like, I mean, it is disgusting. It looks rotted and everything else. Now, obviously, this film takes place after Part 7, which, if I'm not mistaken, Part 7 was the psychic lady, right, that put him underground, or underwater, back underwater, I should say. So, yeah, I mean, truth be told, it is definitely one of those more interesting films because, first of all, it's leading after such a wild idea of like a psychic battle. I cannot remember the character's name, but she has psychic abilities and she's basically using her telekinetic abilities to fight Jason. And then Jason gets thrown into the lake, and her father, who died but was psychically brought back, came up and pulled him under. So that movie was kind of garbage in my opinion. But this movie was such a good follow-up because it's actually interesting, it's funny, and it takes it to a whole new world. Also, they're on a cruise, kind of like a cruise liner type deal for a little while, which is really interesting as well because there's a lot of really cool stuff that they can do. There's also an infamous scene that plays really heavily because in the Friday the 13th community, a lot of people think that Jason Voorhees has like paranormal, abilities such as teleportation. And then in the film, actually, there's a couple scenes that really push that narrative. When you hear people talk about whether or not he does have paranormal actual like abilities, but there's a scene where he's in a dance room and the lights are flashing and everything else, and the woman I think is a little bit high, and it's honestly a really cool scene. I don't know if I can show it or not, but that's a really, really, really wild scene, and it's a lot of fun. But so that's enough of part two. Basically, part two is just talking about how, this movie is on such a different scale than other films. Not only are we getting to see Jason in the big city, in the Big Apple, we're also getting to see Jason in elements he's never been put into before. And it honestly makes for a very interesting film. Now, don't get me wrong, this movie is still weird and awful in some ways, but it still gives us a little bit of something to work with. But now we're going to move on to part three. So reason number three, part three, as to why I think this is a great, kind of a good movie and somewhat awful, is the fact that it is awful. So a lot of people critically disliked and panned this movie because it had weak humor. It had basically the plot. A lot of people thought the plot was stupid. A lot of people thought that why would this be occurring? What's the motivation? Where's the characters? Emphasis here, like why is this happening? And a lot of people thought that there wasn't enough of that plot or plot armor to protect the characters in a way that made it interesting. So a lot of people felt that about this film. I mean, there are other issues that, I could probably read from a book here about why people didn't like this film. But generally, it was the plot, the failure of humor, and basically they're not able to deliver on a promise of its previous entity. But in my opinion, this movie is better than the film that occurred before part 7. But irregardless of that, this movie is bad, but it's good, right? It's one of those movies that it's playing up on tropes that it created, right? So, you have these famous slasher films like Halloween that kind of introduces this like shape character, right? Where it's a slow moving killer. It's an apex predator, but it's slow moving and it just kind of pops up out of nowhere, right? And obviously that kind of bled into other film industries such as Friday the 13th. And Friday the 13th is such a diluted film series. We started from Pamela Voorhees in the first film to Jason Voorhees in the last film. You know what I mean? And obviously Pamela was only in one film, but you see this evolution of Jason, right? He goes from the guy in the potato sack to the guy with the hockey mask in part 3, and then so on and so forth, to where he's died multiple times and is brought back to life by a bolt of lightning. Or in this film, I think that what brought him back was there was some underwater cables. It got cut, I think, because I think there was like a boat and its anchor cut the cables, and then that basically brought him back to life. So it's just one of those things where it has such campy, tropey things that happen, but it's still somehow so great. And I never understood how it could be so great, but still be so awful. But regardless of that, I'm going to give my final thoughts here in the last part of this episode. So let's do it. So final thoughts. Oh man. So I kind of gave just 3 brief reasons why I really love Jason Takes Manhattan and why it's stupid as hell, but it's still such a great movie. You have such great characters and such great actors, and Kane Hodder is one of my favorite actors to have ever played Jason. His body form is just perfect for the character. And not only that, you have this such wide-scale Jason movie, Friday the 13th film, where you've never seen Jason in the city before. You've never really seen Jason on a boat for an extended period of time, because the movie's like half and half on like that boat and then half on in New York City. And not only that, but you also have just the fact that this movie is so campy. It falls into a lot of those campy movie tropes, but instead of it just being silly and kind of ridiculous, it kind of plays up on the hilarity a little bit, in my opinion, and it really progresses the plot forward in a way. Now, obviously, I understand that this is not a critically well-received movie, but when have I ever talked about a critically well-received, I guess that's not true. I've talked about plenty of probably critically received movies, but anyways, this movie is just one of those films that I can watch and I can just enjoy it, you know what I mean? And it's not as much of a horror film as it is just a slasher flick, you know? And for instance, there's also these there are these other movies that I've watched before that kind of fall into a similar characterization. You know, some of the Halloween films do the same thing for me. You know, I can watch, you know, for instance, Halloween 4 and 5, you know, which is, I think, Return and Revenge of Michael Myers. They fall into a very similar trope issue where the films are inherently supposed to be more humorous in a way, and that's kind of what propels the plot forward, is this quote-unquote humor. In addition to that, you know, you have other films like the Nightmare on Elm Street films who also do something similar. A lot of the Dream Warrior / Dream Child movies were more funny than I feel like they were actually scary. You know, they were really tropey and they really had a lot of campiness, and this movie is the same. You know, Jason Takes Manhattan is such a campy mess that, in my opinion, it makes it entertaining and fun to have. So, obviously, I know that a lot of people didn't like this movie. I'm sure a lot of you didn't like this movie. But irregardless, I feel like we can all agree that this movie did what it was supposed to do, and it was to entertain us. You know, I was entertained. You know, this was one of those horror movies where I sat down and was watching it, and I'm like, oh my God, what am I watching, you know? And I don't know. That's always been my feelings on it, and I always felt like as long as I'm entertained by a movie and I can find some benefit to it, there's no reason not to like it. But, I guess that's just my 2 cents. So, hope everybody out there is having fun, staying safe, and enjoying their Friday the 13th. I hope you enjoyed this. I wanted to do this video in slightly different fashion. So I kind of broke it up into 3 significant parts, so that way this felt a little more organized. I've actually gotten some feedback that some of my videos are not as organized as they should, which that doesn't surprise me whatsoever. But I am going to try and do that moving forward. So I hope you guys enjoyed the new format of the video. I'm also trying to switch up the music in the videos as well. I have a wonderful music service that I use for you know, royalty-free music, and there's a subscription service. So if you guys are ever interested in that as well, I can also give you guys a tour of that because it's a lot of fun. But anyways, hope you guys are having fun. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and make sure you drop a like, give us a comment, give us a subscribe. Visit us on Facebook and Twitter. I have all of that in the description, as well as at the end of the film, or not the film, the episode, whatever it's called. And then in addition to that, everybody stay safe out there. It is Friday the 13th. All the crazies are out, so as they say. So everybody out there, stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy, and keep on growing. We'll see you in the next one.